Police brutality. Not sure police brutality is on the rise or that we finally have proof thanks to advancements in technology. To touch on this topic, today we face people who will make up stories about being harassed or assaulted by police officers when nothing truly happened. For example, a woman in Texas was being arrested for driving while intoxicated. She tried to say that the DPS trooper sexually assaulted her when the body camera said different and the trooper was just doing his job with no sexual assault. You said body cameras would hold police accountable for committing brutality. An NYPD cop going uncharged after committing brutality on camera determined that was a lie. Yes, we finally do have proof due to technology, specifically body cameras. One example where the police officer was in the wrong was in Balch Springs, Texas, when a police officer shot and killed 15-year-old Jordan Edwards as he was driving away. Due to the body cameras, the police department had video footage that showed what happened was in fact inconsistent with the officer's initial statement. Some will try to argue that police officers are never held accountable for their actions and that the incidents are swept under the rug, but rarely does that happen when it comes to shootings. 3 days after the teen was killed, the officer who shot him was in fact held accountable, being fired and facing murder charges. Police brutality. It can go both ways. Realistically, this is like 100% true. There are hundreds of reports where police have been killed feloniously and accidentally. On average, according to Officer Down Memorial page, 39% of the killings have been non-felonious, while a large number of 61% are intentional and felonious. Of 66 law enforcement officers who were feloniously killed, 17 were ambushed, 13 were answering disturbance calls, 9 were investigating suspicious persons or circumstances, 6 were engaged in tactical situations, 5 were performing investigative activities, 4 were conducting traffic pursuits or stops, 3 were investigating drug-related matters, 3 were victims of unprovoked attacks, 1 was answering a burglary, 1 was answering a robbery, 4 were attempting other arrest. The weapons used, offenders used firearms to kill 62 of the 66 victim officers. 37 were slain with handguns, 24 with rifles, and 1 with a shotgun. 4 officers were killed with vehicles used as weapons. Of the 66 were white, 4 were black or African American, and 1 was Asian or Native Hawaiian. Here's another chart of statistics. So this bar graph goes from 2010 to 2018. All of this information is based off of this bar graph. So non-felonious is 39% of the year of 2016. Felonious was a high number of 61%. So on this side we have just the numbers because it wasn't very clear on the bar graph. From 2010 all the way to 2018, and we started at 180, and over the years the numbers of police killed has actually dropped down to 130. But that's just based off of 1 year. You can see that some of these, like only one in the year of 2011 was at 187 instead of 180 in 2010. Here's another statistical page from the FBI website. And it's just 2018 law enforcement officers killed. It explains how they died, the number of each situation, and it so in 2018 to date and 2017 same time. So in the year 2018, 49 were feloniously killed, 36 were accidental. 2017, 38 were feloniously killed, and 45 were accidental. Notice that in 2017 to 2018, the numbers went from 45 to 36. So they did drop. But sadly, 2017 to 2018 went from 38 to 49, meaning more officers were feloniously killed. People think screw the police, though personally I think we need to not only think about the people who are so-called brutalized, but about the people who, the police who also have families and for the most part are just trying to do their jobs while they're risking their lives on the daily. Don't get me wrong, police brutality is very, very real and it is a problem, but it is not as common and extreme as people make it seem. If you look at the numbers from the 20th century and how much police brutality has dropped, our country really has come a long way. People during segregation, roughly 1960s to 1990s, are the ones who really experienced police brutality. The problem with police brutality isn't that the police are racist or want to punish African Americans. The problem is how people respond to the police. Is it respectfully or is it with violence? Because they are scared of going to jail for something they shouldn't be put in jail for. Many of you may not know this, but since the original Constitution was made, over 20,000 states have been added, most which are unnecessary and too stringent on the people. Since the Clinton crime bill, though it did drop crime rate, it increased how people act when a cop is being pulled over. Maybe it's due to false fear or laws being laid against them. If there's not a victim, you shouldn't be able to put people in jail. If it is a victimless crime, they should be fined rather than placed in prison or jail. An example of a victimless crime is collecting rainwater. Yes, this is a real law, but there's my point. Why are people getting arrested for this? There's no victim, they're not hurting anyone. After looking at the prison population numbers, America has the highest population out of all countries, and for the land of the free, we have pretty high numbers. Eric Garner, for example, caught for selling cigarettes illegally, but only because he didn't have the proper licensing to do it and was not paying his taxes at the time. Who is the victim for this circumstance? Who was he hurting? Agreeably, yes, he should be getting licenses and paying taxes. Go ahead and fine him, but to detain him when that is his job, how he makes a living, what happened to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? If the police did not have the right to arrest him and would have just gave a ticket, there would be no need for force and Eric Garner would still be alive. No victim, no crime. Why are the people in politics saying they want to help and bring statistics down, yet they keep adding pointless laws? Our problem is not police brutality, it's making criminals into victims and heroes. In 2016, there was a shooting in Dallas. 11 cops injured, 5 were killed. The man who shot the cops was African American and stated that they were killed as payback, and he specifically set out to kill as many white officers as possible. The 5 officers killed were Warren Aarons, Michael Kroll, Michael J. Smith, Brent Thompson, and Patrick Zamariba. These are the 5 officers killed, and notice how they are all, like stated before, white. So this next slide is obviously just a picture of the rioting for Black Lives Matter. When the Dallas shooting happened, Black Lives Matter stated in response, "To assign the actions of one person to an entire movement is dangerous and irresponsible. We continue our efforts to bring about a better world for all of us, yet they don't go by their word. People at the riots and protesting things that we as whites target them and for all the shooting and disapprove and blame them for the incidents that happened with cops, though they target all whites and blame all cops for police brutality. Their reasoning behind all the protesting is because they want peace and are peacefully rioting, but then they go burning buildings and cars in their city, killing more of their race because those cities have higher population of African Americans. As founder of Black Lives Matter said, we need to value ourselves and fight back, meaning violence. Places like Maryland, Chicago, New York, Minnesota, Louisiana, with most of the riotings, are mostly known as Democratic states. Protesters will complain all they want and say we're racist, but the Republicans are the only ones who are actually changing rules and trying to end it. For instance, Trump just took the first step in ending the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, made by Democratic President Bill Clinton, which is what has put so many people in jail due to 3 strikes, and you're in prison for the rest of your life, no matter what it is. The act which Trump signed is called the First Step Act, and it is a bipartisan criminal justice reform. Bipartisan meaning of or involving the agreement or cooperation of 2, not 1, political parties that usually oppose each other's policies. While in presidency, Obama may have addressed all the chaos, but did he ever actually take a step forward in ending it? Here's a picture of when the rioting was happening. This man is holding a Black Lives Matter sign, and as you can see, this, not really sign, but like box or wall, says "Kill Cops." Once again, that touches how the Black Lives Matter founder states that we need to value ourselves and fight back with violence. There's Trump talking about the new deal he just signed off, and that's the president who put it in law. Anytime there's a terrorist attack, you say, "Don't judge all Muslims." Anytime there's a police brutality, you say, "Screw all cops, pick a side." Here's another slide. As you can see, the citizen is totally in the cop's face, just yelling at him. So then in response, the cop gets in the citizen's face. And that's when, if you notice, all the other citizens bring out their cameras and record when the cop is yelling back at the citizen. And that's realistically kind of how it goes. People will make up things and only get the bad part, if that makes sense. Media be like, brutal cop humiliating a young Afro-American half his size. All this is a cop, playing basketball with an African-American teenage boy. Although we see a lot of posts and pictures of people being shot or assaulted, half of the time we don't get the story right, and I feel like that's partially because the media is quick to judge. People will try to argue that statistics are racist and black lives are most brutalized, but whites make a population of 63%, while blacks are 13%, which is why the numbers for blacks may seem higher. Blacks commit 75% of all shootings, 70% of all robberies, and 66% of all violent crime in New York City, even though they consist of 23% of the city's population. When violence from citizens occur, officers will use force if needed. When I say force, I mean when the police interact most often with violent criminals, armed suspects, and those resisting arrest, and that is mostly black neighborhoods. 12% of white and Hispanic homicide deaths were due to police officers, while only 4% of black homicide deaths were the result of police officers. It is also statistically proven that blacks are more likely to kill cops than be killed by cops. Now, a lot of you probably think I'm like crazy right now, but according to FBI data, it is found that 40% of cop killers are black. The police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black than a cop killing an unarmed black person. Police behavior during traffic stops is where most incidents happen as well. According to Bureau of Justice of Statistics, 13% black drivers than white, which was 10%, and 10% Hispanic drivers were pulled over at a traffic stop. Drivers pulled over by an officer of the same race or ethnicity were more likely a high 83% than drivers pulled over by an officer of a different race or ethnicity. 74% believed that the reason for the traffic stop was valid. White drivers were both ticketed and searched at lower rates than black and Hispanic drivers, but about 1% of drivers pulled over in traffic stops had physical force used against them by police. That's only 1%. Of these drivers, 55%, over half, believed the police behaved properly during the stop. According to Daily Wire, police are more likely to shoot whites than blacks. Police are also less likely to shoot at unarmed black suspects than unarmed white suspects. They also also state from American Free Press's Peter Paparazakis, for every black killed by a white police officer in the U.S. every year, there are about 71 blacks killed by other blacks. There's a lot that floats around in our head and creates emotions and feelings which are justified. But just because we have feelings doesn't mean statistically or realistically it is true. But I do believe it clouds our judgment. So yes, like I said, police brutality is very, very real and it is a problem. But we don't see it as often as we used to, and people say it happens more often than what is statistically proven by records of the government. My final slide is just a video, not even a video, of audio recording of Ben Shapiro talking about police brutality.
So all I can say is this: the easiest way to avoid running with the cops is not to have a run-in with the cops. Meaning that, as a general rule, you know, virtually every immigrant community to the United States, I'll take as an example, virtually every immigrant community to the United States originally had lots of problems with the cops. The Jewish community early in the 20th century had a lot of problems with the cops in New York. The Italian community had lots of problems with the cops. The Irish community, the German community, the Hispanic community, virtually all of them, when they came to the United States, had the Asian community had significant problems with the cops. As crime rates decline in those communities, it turns out that the problems with the cops tend to disappear. And so the easiest way to get rid of a lot of these problems is not to put all the onus on the cops, but to say, okay, the cops are human. They're going to make some bad mistakes, and we need to prosecute them if they do something really terrible, obviously. But if you really want to tackle this thing on a systemic level, crime rates have to go down.